It's difficult. I mean, I'll admit, I could not get a second source to confirm this. I tried it out on US officials who said you can go with that, you can be confident you're on the right track, but they couldn't confirm it. So yes, some stories you only get a one source, and perhaps we won't for some years. I believe it'll come out eventually, but it's a very difficult one, because essentially if for a Pakistani to confirm it, they're committing treason in the Pakistani military's eyes. So you're asking someone to really go against his own country. That's how they view it.
Well, let me add some other notes of skepticism. You know, as you know, I wrote a book about Bin Laden and the hunt for Bin Laden. I've discovered that there was one of the wives who was living on a compound didn't know that Osama bin Laden was living in the compound. I mean, bin Laden was hiding from people on the compound. Now, we had satellite coverage over that compound from August of 2010 to May 2011, right? We know that he never left, forget about leaving the compound, he never left the second or the third floor, right? So he wasn't going anywhere to meet with people, and no one was coming to meet with him. So that kind of gives me pause if there was sort of a controller or somebody that he was in touch with in the Pakistani side. The other question that you have to always ask is who benefits, cui bono, right? So on the Pakistani side, as we discussed before we had a private discussion, you know, Musharraf is lucky to be alive after those two very serious assassination attempts in 2003. The person who investigated those attempts was who?
Kiani.
General Kiani. So he was in charge of the very serious investigation of the Musharraf assassination attempts, which were carried out by al-Qaeda. Abu Faraj al-Libi, who was the guy responsible, who was in touch with bin Laden, is now in US custody as a result of that investigation. So the question is, you know, Kiani's Pasha's boss, why would he countenance a bin Laden desk when he went to great efforts to break up this al-Qaeda ring that had tried to kill his boss, General Musharraf? And it's kind of like puzzling. Why would what's the point? And again, then on the US side, you know, there are a large number of people in the US government who, you know, have very dim views of Pakistan. And the US government is not a unitary, you know, there's the CIA has one view, CENTCOM has another view, NSC might have another view. So, and it's a very large group of people, and lots of people who would be willing, if there was a real smoking gun, to let it out. And I guess my question is, if it exists, and we have these thousands of pages of documents, bin Laden had no idea he'd ever be found, right? So these documents are pretty effective. I mean, they're sort of bin Laden unplugged, right? And so if he had a bin Laden desk, wouldn't he have communication with them in some shape or form?
Yeah, but I think it wouldn't have been written. I think it would have been.
Well, we've established that nobody's visiting the compound. He's not leaving for at least a year that we know of, and that's when we had satellite coverage over it.
Right, but I think people could visit, couldn't they?
No one visited the compound. In fact, people were.
And you see, neighbors saw the women go out.
Well,
to the hospital and stuff.
Yeah. Right? Well, the women. There were 24 people living on the compound. Right. And
so the courier and the brother and their wives
yes,
came and went. And some of the Arab women went to the hospital. We know that as well. I don't know if it was in the last.
Well, okay, so people might have visited the compound disguised as women, you were saying?
Yeah, well, sometimes they saw, they knew there was an auntie, but we know he had 3 wives there, so it could have been the 3 wives. But there were the 2 Pakistani women and an auntie in full black burqa who was seen going to the hospital. And his Yemeni wife gave birth in the hospital. So the women were going out to see doctors or whatever. But you make some very good points, but let me show that for each point there's another point. So he didn't travel, but then we have this recorded intelligence briefing of 2009 where bin Laden met with Saifullah Akhtar in Kohat in 2009. And now that was in the Daily Times before the raid. I tracked it down after the raid, but it was an anonymously written report. I found the reporter. I found the person who leaked it, and it came from all the Pakistani intelligence agencies, civilian and military, had seen that report. It was a combined intelligence report that bin Laden was in Pakistan. So my point is, if the Pakistani intelligence know that he's meeting militant leaders and he's in Pakistan, why weren't they hunting for him harder? That really
well, I don't think they wanted to find him necessarily.
The second thing is, Libby yes, they did a very hard investigation tracking down Libby. He did try and kill Musharraf. At the time, I totally agree with you. They did a very serious investigation. They found Libby, they tracked him, they got him. But Musharraf also writes in his book that that they nearly caught Libby in Abbottabad, and he had the use of 3 safe houses in Abbottabad, and they raided the wrong one, and he got away. You know, they raided one, and he was actually in another, and he escaped. And Musharraf writes about that. You know, so now why aren't they checking every house in Abbottabad? That's just when they were building.
Well, this is that this goes to the question of competence.
Don't give me that one.
Well, no, but it's true. It's like, you know, but
yeah, I just don't buy that. And I've got a cabinet minister in my book saying, don't believe the armed forces, you know, Pakistan state is more competent than anyone else would believe. You know, and there's another minister who says after the Lal Masjid attack or siege, he says to an ISI general, every morning you have on your desk the minutes of who I met the night before and what we talked about. So don't tell me you don't know that there's weapons and militants in Lal Masjid just 100 yards from your headquarters. You know, so the idea of they're incompetent, they're not. Well,
look, all human beings are incompetent. I mean, it's
well,
a
okay,
good general
but they're also
explanation.
brilliant. I mean, the ISI are brilliant.
Well, no, I don't accept the idea that they're brilliant. I mean, because if they're brilliant, why would they be doing this strategy that you point out, which is so self-defeating?
Well, but they think they're going to achieve through chaos what they want to achieve, which is dominance of the region. I agree. I think it's a ruinous strategy, but I think they really believe in it.
I guess one final point on the Bin Laden issue. Admiral Mullen's last official act after 27 visits to Pakistan was to testify before a Senate committee and say that the Haqqani network was owned and operated by the ISI. Presumably he has access to all the information that secret information the United States has, right?
Right.
It's kind of strange he didn't take this opportunity to say they also were harboring Bin Laden, since, as you know, that was, it went down pretty badly in Pakistan, that public statement.
Yeah, I think the Haqqani, Mullen was particularly angry about the Haqqani arm because he just had, and I show it in the book, you know, before he made that speech, they just had these devastating attacks in Afghanistan. There was a huge truck bomb that went into a base in Wardak. And I mean, it was unbelievable. They didn't kill many people, but they wounded, I think it was 90 plus or 70 plus, I'd have to check.
He was more angry at the Haqqani network than Al-Qaeda?
Well, he just had these 2 devastating attacks. So there's this truck bomb that injured 70 plus American soldiers. And then they had this attack, you know, one of these, what they call a complex attack, very close to the US embassy, to the point that the ambassador had to go into a bunker for 24 hours. And the battle raged right in Kabul around the American embassy, and people going to the consulate got injured by mortars. And they'd taken a sort of high-rise, half-built construction site and rained rockets down on the embassy. So those 2, and I think by then, you know, they were tracking Badruddin Haqqani's phone for ages, and so I think they heard him directing the attacks. They knew he's calling from Waziristan. They know he's closely in contact. I mean, they knew Badruddin Haqqani was meeting with ISI officials. So I think Mullen's anger was because the proof was so clear. I think, you know, I don't know what Mullen knows about Obama, but I've had some very senior military people write to me after my story saying, you know, congratulating me and saying you're on the right track. So I think there are some, I don't know what they know, but I don't think just because he didn't address the Obama issue doesn't mean he knows things. I just think he had very, very clear evidence that made him particularly disappointed and angry about the Haqqanis. Because it was directly affecting American lives in Afghanistan, and what kind of ally is that's doing these things?
Right. Well, what kind of ally would harbor the mastermind of 9/11? You know, and you know, because that was obviously when I reported my book, I talked on the record to Admiral Mullen, Mike Leiter, who ran the National Counterterrorism Center, Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State at the time, General Cartwright, who was the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Michel Fournet, who was head of policy at DOD, Mike Vickers, who was in charge of special operations, Tony Blinken, who's now the Deputy National Security Advisor, Dennis McDonough, who's now the National Security Advisor of the Chief of Staff. The list goes on. And this was the first question I had. It's like, was Pakistan cognizant of bin Laden being there? And this was a huge debate that they had at the NSC. They had 5 meetings. And that all these people, I mean, it's not like some of them are not fans of Pakistan. They all universally said they did not know. Cameron Munter, who was ambassador at the time.
Well, yeah, but
so what
he doesn't know anything. I mean, I would go to his off-the-record briefings, and I would have to tell, I knew more than he did. I mean, so some of them, I think, are sitting in Washington.
You're saying that the head of
the ambassador of Pakistan, I knew more than he did.
No,
that's for sure.
That may well be the case, but I'm asking about, you're saying that you know more than the CIA, the National Counterterrorism Center, CENTCOM, DOD, the NSC, the White House?
Well, I'll say that one senior official who I did try out this special desk on, was amazed because he said we haven't got that, but he said it makes sense. He said you should go with it.
It makes sense, but it feels like for a lot of people that it's something they want to believe, but that's theology.
No, but
that's not evidence.
I think they can't necessarily get it. What Pakistani is going to say to an American reveal that? It came to me differently. It's someone who's cooperating with a long-time Pakistani source. Persuading to let me have it is different to giving it to a CIA official. So I think there is a difference in motivation of telling a Pakistani journalist first, than telling a CIA official.
Okay.
But I think also, let's see. I'm sure it'll come out. I really do believe this. But I do not trust all the officials, because I think I was horrified to hear that a national security aide in the Bush administration said they used to sit around for ages, and this was 2006, discussing, is Pakistan supporting the Taliban or not? And that shocked me so much. Are they still discussing it? When, 2003, 2002, it was clear. I talked to an American ambassador, and I asked about, I was getting these stories from these Taliban who were being forced to go back and fight, or told they would be imprisoned, or even worse, they were threatened to be killed. And I asked an American ambassador, and I was told, oh, I've never heard anything like that. And I thought, are you stupid, or you're not doing your job, or are you lying to me? I mean,
but that's a sort of
there's a level.
argument.
No, but there's really a level that is serious, and I think sometimes it's lying. Sometimes it's just not wanting to say on record something to a journalist that is just too sensitive. But sometimes I think there's the head in the sand, but actually what I really do want to say, and is again I mention it in the book, we shouldn't spend all our time debating the toss on this. Do you believe it? Do you not? Because actually and I have a diplomat saying, we shouldn't have spent years and years saying, are the Pakistanis supporting the Taliban or not? We should have actually said, this is happening. This is what it looks like on the ground. What is our policy? And I think the same with this. Because I believe Zawahiri is still in Pakistan. I know he is, actually. And I actually had quite a recent, very interesting tip that he was in Baluchistan. And so it's more not who's hiding him and why, but it's more, what do we do about it?
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's really the main issue that we're looking at.
Okay. If you have a question, raise your hand and identify yourself and wait for the microphone. Where is the microphone? Start with that gentleman there. Tyler.
Good afternoon. It was very stimulating conversation. I was in Pakistan as a journalist as the Soviets were attacking Afghanistan. And even during that time, the Arabs were coming to the soil of Pakistan, and they were getting equipped and going to Kunar and Jalalabad province. And they did lots of atrocities there that I'm an eyewitness to that. However, the bureaucracy from the United States, and the bureaucracy of Pakistan didn't want to admit anything which is happening beyond ordinary. At that time, Mr. Oakley was the ambassador of United States to Pakistan, and all these atrocities were happening in the soil of Afghanistan. At that time, this whole movement of fundamentalism was not that strong. It could be controlled, but nothing happened.
Okay, we're going to have a question because we
Sure.
only have 15 minutes.
But my question is now, it's going beyond the point that's only the threat of Taliban. With the new generation of the military in Pakistan and ISI, do you think there is going to be a nuclear threat by the terrorists from the Pakistani soil towards the entire world?
Doesn't bear thinking. I don't think so. I mean, I still, when you work in Pakistan and you interview the military, there is a great sense of responsibility and a great pride about their nuclear arsenal. It's untouchable. Journalists are not allowed to write about it much, and certainly not allowed to criticize it or look deeply at the proliferation problems under A.Q. Khan. But I do think at the same time there is a responsibility there. And so although I'm very critical of the use of proxy war as a tactic in Afghanistan and Kashmir, I think, and perhaps it's wishful thinking, but I think the Pakistani military has a sense of responsibility on keeping its nuclear arsenal independent and untouched. They don't want interference from foreigners, but I think as the ultimate deterrent, and they will guard that jealously, but I think, and I hope, sensibly.
This lady here.
Hi, my name is Ann Rutherford, and at the end of Lone Survivor, it was noted that the Pashtun, the Afghani, protected the American because he was a guest. And this was also said of the Taliban, that they protected the Al-Qaeda because they were a guest. If we had known more about the people and dealt with them as a people, things would have been different. And do you think that they have figured out more about the Afghans as a people and to help them and to deal with the insurgency?
You mean Al-Qaeda have? Or so who's they have worked out? Oh, you mean the Americans?
Yeah, have Americans.
Have
learned.
Americans worked out? Well, certainly you can't spend more than a decade in a country and fighting and not learn something. So, of course, what's impressive is that I think the American military has learned a great deal over the both wars, Iraq and Afghanistan. So they fight better, more cleverly. They did, they worked out the whole, revamped the counterinsurgency strategy under Petraeus, and you get a lot of linguists, and then amazingly you see these anthropologists going alongside the soldiers into villages, advising on cultural issues. So there's been a great deal of learning, but at the same time you see how poles apart